Historians often debate the origin of the Jelberry family. Some think that they started with cave wall paintings depicting a prophecy of peasantry life dating back 20,000 years ago. The most tangible origin of the Jelberry lineage can be found within the Roman Empire. At the peak of its reign in the British Isles, the Roman Empire offered luxurious lifestyles for all of their aristocrats. For all other subjects, horrific slavery and oppression ensued. Before the Jelberry family would become landlocked peasants, they ruled over the British Isles on behalf of the Roman Empire. Nicostratus Jelberius was one of the most prominent governors of the British Isles, but this would be the peak of power for the Jelberry family. At the collapse of the Roman Empire in the early 5th century, an array of barbaric tribes, particularly the warring Saxons and Britons, forced many remaining Romans into slavery, including the Jelberry family, signaling the beginning of Jelberry peasantry once foretold. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Jelberry family would continue their toil under the rule of countless regimes, including the Arthurian court, for which one young Jelberry rose to the rank of squire of the Round Table, only to be cruelly executed by Danish invaders. His descendants would come to fruition under the rule of such Danes, who were all the more brutal than their Anglican predecessors. Beginning in the 8th century, Northern European invaders, known as Vikings, launched assaults on the British Isles, conquering provinces along the eastern and northern coasts. As these powerful peoples warred over the Isles, the unfortunate Jelberry family fell victim to each and every one of them. The Norman conquest of the 11th century saw the end of Anglo-Saxon and Norse rule, and as the kingdoms of England were united under a single crown, the Jelberries faced another equally dire threat, the outbreak of the 100 Years' War, and subsequently, the War of the Roses. A civil war over British succession subjected generations to brutal warfare. Nevertheless, the Jelberries did their best to persevere. Though the Middle Ages were eventually broken by the Renaissance, for most Europeans, life bore minimal changes, and this was apparent in the Jelberry family. By the 16th century, the British Empire cemented itself within the British Isles, and thus the Jelberry family found themselves living stagnantly as peasants. The Jelberries worked within the open field system for years. However, in the mid-18th century, the Jelberry family was forced into the enclosure system. This was a turning point in the Jelberry lineage, when the prominent peasant Nigel Jelberry, whose infamous life story was adapted into the critically acclaimed biopic Nigel the Peasant, lashed out against the system. Nigel wasn't quite known for the work he accomplished, but like much of his lineage, his life was torturous and ultimately ended in his fate. Nigel Jelberry was involved in a hostile dispute with his landlord during the enclosure movement that placed restrictions on peasants, making life more difficult for peasants such as Nigel. Nigel grew frustrated with the enclosure movement and killed his landowner, for which he was executed for treason by British soldiers, who then burned his village to the ground. This was so significant for the Jelberry family, because by murdering his landlord, Nigel came into possession of some valuable materials, the ever-elusive diamonds, which he stripped off his lord's corpse. These would be passed on through generations. Perhaps the curse of peasantry foretold since ancient times was coming to an end. Nigel Jelberry left behind a son after his untimely death. As England moved into the Industrial Revolution, his son, Niles Jelberry, represented the continuation of these dire living conditions and the refusal to submit to them. Niles was an orphan and was forced into a textile factory where he and his fellow child laborers faced abuse from their employers. Despite the overall step forward that came with industrialization, progress was built on the backs of many groups, such as the unfortunate Jelberries. When Niles came of age, to his surprise, he received inheritance from his father. He used this newfound power to honor Nigel's legacy by burning down the factory where he worked, and in his adulthood opening a charity school to help the future generations prosper. This was not the last history would see of the muckraking Jelberries, nor was it the climax. When Niles' son, Nicholas, was drafted to fight in the Revolutionary War in the New World, he defected to the side of the Patriots, putting an end to his family's terrible toil in the British Isles once and for all. Things were looking up for them. Nicholas, with the help of his wartime pal, Rufus, ran for president of the United States in 1800, with smashing success, until in true Jelberry fashion, a scandal erupted in time to tear him down. Headlines across the U.S. exposed Nicholas for being British, not a true patriot. Like Nicostratus Jelberius had before him, he fell from grace and performed terribly in the election. Unlike Nicostratus, though, he did not find himself enslaved. He was able to go on to live a happy and fulfilling life, regardless of what fate or destiny had to say about it. The Jelberry family represents the epitome of simple life in Europe, in which the average individual is often clouded over by momentous events. However, as history reaches a modern era, we start to see thinkers and movements break the mold of centuries prior. The Jelberry name was once a collection of glanced-over cave drawings, but is now considered a fundamental block in modern-day progressive thought. European history is often known for bickering royalty and armed conflict. However, the European history we speak of today would not be possible without the average European, such as the Jelberry lineage we've all grown so fond of. Today, the Jelberry family is lived on through Matthew Jelberry, a high school teacher who over the past few years has decided to teach his students about the family and heritage he finds himself proud of. The next time you think of European history, don't think of one of the King Henrys. Think of one of the barely thought of subjects who could only dream that research could revive their family name.
Used to